What do you think the biggest mistake young psychology students make when starting their careers?
A lot of students want to give up too soon or quit too early. Once in a while, try the uncomfortable choice.
Is IQ more fixed and EQ more malleable?
IQ gets you in the door, but EQ gets you upstairs.
If I wanted to get on Love Island, for example, what's the secret formula? What do I have to do?
I think the most important thing you need to do if you want to be on one of these shows is...
World-renowned clinical psychologist and best-selling author Dr. Stein is a pioneer in emotional intelligence and the founder of Multi-Health Systems, a global leader in psychological assessments for over 40 years.
He has worked with elite organizations like the Canadian Forces, the U.S. military, and Fortune 500 companies.
What's more, he's brought his expertise to reality TV, consulting on Survivor, Big Brother, The Amazing Race, MasterChef, Beast Games, and more.
Author of The EQ Leader and The EQ Edge, Dr. Stein has transformed how we understand leadership, performance, and mental well-being.
In this episode, we dive into his incredible career, from shaping reality TV to transforming how we understand emotional intelligence.
Get ready for an inspiring conversation with one of psychology's most influential voices.
So, Stephen, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Well, it's great to be with you.
Yeah. We start off these podcasts with just a little bit of a dad joke. Here's the riddle. Why was Pavlov's hair so soft?
Because he kept getting wet. I don't know.
Because he conditioned it.
Oh, right. Should have got that.
All right, Stephen. Well, we first met last year when you reached out to members of the Ontario Psychological Association about consulting for a reality TV show filmed here in Toronto. Back then, all we knew about the show was that it had a code name of Project Greenlight. Now we know it as Beast Games, which is on Amazon Prime right now. I think I can speak for many of the psychologists that were on the team that it was one of the most interesting and fascinating, exciting experiences we've ever had. So just wondering if you can start off by sharing how you got into this world of reality TV and what drew you to it.
Okay. So the way I got into it, like the way I got into a number of things, was almost accidental. My main work was around developing psychological assessments and doing research and marketing in that area. And one of the areas we developed early on was emotional intelligence. So one day I got a call from a colleague of mine in Los Angeles asking me a number of questions about our test of emotional intelligence, the EQI it's called. And as we got on talking and I'm trying to find out why he wanted it, he told me he was at this party and he met this guy, some kind of TV producer named Mark, and he wanted to do some show where they were going to put people on an island and vote people off every week. And they needed, for insurance purposes, they needed to do psychological assessments to make sure that the people were stable. And I said, who's going to watch a show like that? That sounds crazy. Anyway, I worked with him, and it turned out to be Mark Burnett, and the show was Survivor, the first big reality show.
Wow.
And so I worked with him on that, and then I went on to a show you might have heard of called Apprentice. Some famous people came out of there. One, I think, is president of the United States right now. And then what happened was eventually reality came to Canada, reality TV shows, and somehow they found out I had been involved with these other ones, and they needed a psychologist. So I started getting calls. I think the first one was Debbie, oh my goodness, I'm blocking out her name, Debbie Travis, who'd had a show with these kids building a house, and they had to be screened, and I screened them. And not only that, but I sort of predicted who would win at the outcome, because I was mainly just hired for the screening, not for the on-set support. And I got a call like 3 months later from her team saying, how did you know who would win this game? I said, well, we did a whole psychological test battery. It helped me understand the individuals and the dynamics and so on. And that just led to many other shows. The word of mouth spread, and I went on to things like Big Brother Canada, Amazing Race, MasterChef, on and on and on and on.
Amazing.
Wow. So what do you look for in contestants? Like if I wanted to get on the next season of Love Island, for example, what's the secret formula? What do I have to do?
Well, there's no real secret formula. Every show is different, and we look for different things depending on whether it's a cooking show, it's an adventure, it's an social experiment. So part of it depends. what I look for, and it's a team approach. Everyone puts in their 2 cents, more or less. I'm more into, are you stable enough? Are you going to make it through the show? Because some of these shows are pretty grueling in terms of 10 weeks or 8 or 10 weeks that you have to last if you make it to the end. And I also make sure there's nothing that could rule you out, any sort of mental health difficulties. If you have, some kind of major psychosis in your background, or borderline personality, or some addiction problems. Although we do want addiction in shows like Intervention, we don't want them in other shows. So, we sort of fine-tune to the show. I think the most important thing you need to do, though, if you want to be on one of these shows, is be yourself. Because one of the things we rule out is people who come in with a persona. I want to be the villain. Let me on there. I'm going to be the villain. Well, that's not going to work. Or I'm Mr. Nice Guy or something. No, you got to be authentic. And generally, you got to have something unique about yourself, something interesting, and often an interesting backstory about yourself.
And in your experience, what do you feel is the number one trait you see in contestants who survive the longest in reality shows?
I think one of the best things in terms of surviving is adaptability. When people come in, a lot of people are fans of the show. They know it inside out. And unfortunately, they plan their whole thing in advance. And when it's not the way you expect, we're always changing things up. It's never the same. And that throws them, right? And they don't know how to deal with the change. So I think one of the best things is, empathy, being able to be aware of what's going on around you and being able to change quickly. Adaptability is important. And again, it depends on the show. Some are more interpersonal, social, so you got to be liked so you don't get thrown out. But you also have to be manipulative, so you can get your friend to throw somebody else out or double cross your friend. So it all depends on what environment you're in.
I know on an annual basis, there's like a tiny number of contestants on reality TV shows that tragically end their life. We've seen some contestants struggle with regret, fear of being judged, even severe mental health issues. Is the industry missing anything when it comes to supporting mental health of contestants at all?
Yeah, I think it's, there are certain production companies that I work with that are the largest. Like I work with all the big shows. And they're very responsible. I mean, we have protocols in place. I do training with the crew to look for signs of mental health during production. We do follow-ups. We do exit interviews. I have on-site care that we provide, such as you helped us with the Beast Games. So the major production companies are very, very cognizant of mental health. And thank God in my 20-odd years or 25 years, I haven't had a serious mental health issue happen following one of our productions. But as you mentioned, there are some. And I've heard some horror stories in shows in US or in Europe where they haven't paid adequate attention. And, each time that happens, I just get more calls for shows that want to be careful. So, yeah, I mean, there are protocols, there are standards. There are a few of us psychologists who work in this field, and we try and pay attention to ethics and how to work in this field properly.
Right.
Yeah, that's so interesting. What are some of the most surprising psychological insights that you've learned from working on these shows and with these contestants? And if you could share any memorable stories while respecting confidentiality, of course.
Well, one of the things that really surprises me and was unexpected, I guess you'd say, is the way many people come out of these shows. And when I say many, I would say something like 75%. Because when I do a lot of debriefing, I've debriefed hundreds of people coming off various shows. The number of them who tell me that they've learned a lot about themselves as a result of the experience. It's almost like in the training world where you do experiential learning in businesses, where you make them go through certain things. I see a lot of parallel where you get through the show, they learn about themselves, and I get them to tell me exactly, what did you learn? What did you learn about yourself or how you deal with others? And it's fascinating because, we're putting them on together with people that they would never encounter in real life. They have to deal with all kinds of different opinions, different races, cultures, and it's generally an enriching experience. What's an interesting experience? I've had a lot of interesting experiences, but I guess one thing that stands out is, as I mentioned, some of these shows are really stressful. And I remember in one case, and they go on for a long time. And part of it is being away, being isolated, not seeing your friends and family, no social media. And I remember we're getting closer, a few episodes away from the end of one show, and this one person had enough. I mean, the stress levels were just too high. And, your first instinct would be, I think we got to get this person off the show. It's just too much. But when I spent time counseling this person while they're on set, and what we talked about is really, I used visualization. I said, okay, what I want you to do right now, I know this is a tough time you're going through and it really hurts. I want you to visualize yourself 5 years out from now. And we're going to try 2 scenarios. So the first scenario we visualize is, think of yourself, you've won the show, or you've done well on the show, or you lasted as long as you could. Looking back on that 5 years from now, I want you to sort of imagine how you would feel, what you would think, go through that whole thing. And then I had them reimagine it where they quit. They walked out at this stage. And again, we went through all the same thing. What would you say to yourself? What would you say to your family, your kids, if you have kids by that point, whatever. And it sort of turned the person around. They sort of changed their attitude. They calmed down the anxiety. It doesn't matter if I win or lose. This is going to be fun. I'm going to make the most of it. The whole attitude changed. The person went on and won the show. And when I've run into them several years later, they just ran over to me and thanked me for having them see it through, for what we did.
Wow. Well, you're not just a reality TV consultant. You founded MHS, a leading company in psychological assessments that's had a significant impact in the field. Can you tell us about MHS, how it got started? A lot of our audience are kind of interested in the business and entrepreneurial side of psychology.
Yeah, so that was also kind of an accidental pivot in my career. I was working as a traditional psychologist at a mental health center, a place called Thistletown Regional Center. It was the largest children's mental health center in Ontario. And I had a large research study at the time we were doing treatment comparisons between conduct disordered kids. We were looking at the new treatment of the day. I'm going back a few years, but cognitive behavior therapy was just so new. People didn't trust it even in those days. So CBT versus traditional behavior therapy with these kids. There was only one problem. As part of a research study, you got to have pre-tests, post-tests, and follow-ups. These are really difficult conduct disorder kids. They told me where I could shove my psychological tests. They weren't willing to take them. So around that time, there were 2 guys named Steve in California, and they invented something called a personal computer. You may have heard of Apple. So it was brand new, and I noticed right away that kids really got into this thing. They had a lot of fun playing with this. So I thought, what if we put some of our tests onto this and interviews onto this computer? So I got a programmer to do it. All of a sudden, these kids are excited. They're lining up in my office trying to take my tests. I thought, this is amazing. Not only that, but we actually published some research showing that the kids, and these were the worst of the worst. When you get to Thistletown, you've already been through everything. This was like the last resort. We found more information in a 1-hour computerized interview than reams and reams of psychiatric reports. We discovered suicide attempts, we discovered drug use, we discovered sexual abuse, none of which was reported in their case histories. So I published that back then, and I thought, and we had media attention. I was in the Toronto Star, all this on TV, talking about this. Say, wow, we're going to revolutionize psychology. This is great. And I wanted to change my research focus at Thistletown, and they said, no, we're not too interested in that. Just stay with the treatment stuff. So I decided I wanted to do it anyway. So I figured I'd do it at night. And my wife, Rodine, was on maternity leave. She was working in an addiction treatment center. We were with our first daughter. And we opened it up in our basement. We just started automating psychological tests. And as far as the psychology revolution, that's a whole other story. That never happened. That didn't happen, believe it or not, until COVID. Psychologists were not willing to move to computers. They still loved their paper and pencil. They were, I call them the last of the transition, where lawyers and business people and other people transitioned into computers. Psychologists, I call the trailing edge. We were the last. But anyway, things did change and work out, and that's what got me into business. And I knew nothing about business. We started a business, And I say that when I give lectures in business schools today. I'm glad you guys are specializing in this, but as a psychologist, I never took a single business course.
Yeah. What do you feel most entrepreneurs get wrong when trying to combine, let's say, psychology with business? And what have you learned?
I don't know very many entrepreneurs who combine psychology and business. I know very few psychologists who've made the transition that I've made. But I think many entrepreneurs, I guess, I don't know if you're speaking from the psychologist side or the entrepreneur side, entrepreneurs who try and apply psychology, well, they're not very well versed in it, and they're big on fads and sort of anything comes and goes. But I think one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs that I've found over the years, and I've met with many leaders and CEOs, is that difficulty of letting go, of giving up certain areas, right? They want to micromanage everything. You know, when you start a company, when we started MHS, I was doing everything, right? I was answering the phone, I was dealing with customers, I was doing sales, marketing, I was involved in product development, like everything, because there's nobody else. But as you grow as an organization, you need people who are better at it. And one of the things I was probably the least competent in was like accounting. I know nothing about accounting. So one of the first things I did was we were able to hire someone who was really competent in accounting. And I think that gave me an edge as a psychologist. I knew I wasn't competent in some of these things, so I was more easily willing to give them up. Whereas a lot of entrepreneurs think they're great at everything and they won't give them up. So I think that's helped me to the point today where I have a senior management team that does, everybody knows more stuff about everything than me. I mean, that's what I love about coming to the company. I go to meetings and I'm there to learn. I'm not there to tell people what to do. The young kids in marketing and social media, they can run circles around what I know. And I love, talking with them and learning from them. And all the way through, even the young psychologists we have doing research and development. I'm at it. I've been out of graduate school for 45, 50 years. So I'm behind on a lot of that stuff. So they're telling me about new developments in R&D and new things in psychology. And it's just great to have young people around.
Do you have any unexpected skills that clinical psychology taught you that helped you succeed in business?
I think there have been a number of unexpected skills, and one of them is sort of psychology in general. I mean, I was in my degree, I was into the scientist practitioner model of clinical psychology, so I was very, very versed in that. And one of the things I wanted to do in business, that was my mindset, right? So I believed in measurement. Everything was measurement. And that fit when I started, everything I had to learn myself through books or lectures or whatever. And I remember learning about marketing through David Ogilvy, was like the big guru in the marketing world. And the idea was that you measure everything. You do a marketing campaign and you count what happens. And, this was I was like a fish in water there. This is like psychology, right? Especially social psychology, where you try an experiment and you see what happens. So I think psychology has helped me in a lot of ways to keep that focus. And on the more clinical side, one of the things I found important throughout the years is what we learned about empathy and the ability to work with employees and to listen to them and to take them seriously, to have respect for them. And I think these are really, really important as we look more into management or leadership and how it's evolved over the 42 or 3 years I've been doing this.
Mm-hmm. If there's one aspect of your career that you love so much you do it for free, what would that be?
It's funny you should mention that. I almost got myself in trouble over that. So I was working with one of the biggest producers in the industry. And, there's a lot of time on a set, on a TV set to talk and schmooze and whatever. And this was he's really big in the industry. And we're talking like buddies about this and about that, about retirement, about things we do and we like to do. And I sort of blurted out, like he's asking me, why I'm doing this or what I like about it, whatever. And I ended up saying something like, I love this so much I would do it for free. And here's the guy who's paying me to be, and he just sort of looked at me like, really, And I said, whoops, I probably shouldn't have said that. It's going to be hard if we ever go back and want to ask for more money for what we do. So yeah, reality TV, I have often felt that was the secret. It was the secret that I let out. I often felt I would do this for free. I mean, you get fed, they look after you. The amount of respect I get on a TV set, it's so much better than what I would get in a psychiatric hospital or a mental health center among psychologists and psychiatrists. I mean, you're just some other psychologist. When I'm on a TV set, it's Dr. Stein this and Dr. Stein that, and it's just amazing. Whatever you say goes. Everyone listens to what you recommend about whatever situation. It's just an amazing place to work.
Yeah, I think a lot of us felt that way on set on Beast Games. I mean, I did. I didn't do it for the money. Just having the experience, being on set, talking with the contestants and also your colleagues. So yeah, it was just really, really rewarding, interesting experience. Stephen, you talked in 2022 to the York University's psychology students at their convocation. You talked about 4 Ps: passion, pivot, positivity, and purpose as guiding principles. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on the main message that you shared with students.
Okay, yeah, it'll be hard to recreate the whole 25 or 30-minute speech. I received an honorary doctorate from York University, and that was my presentation. It was basically showing my career path is what it was. Mm-hmm. It was how, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. My parents wanted to be a dentist, and I wasn't too interested in that. So the passion part was really accidentally, again, finding something that got you really excited. At the time, I think my older brother was in medical school, and he kept complaining about this stupid book he had to read, and he left it on the night table. And I picked it up one night, and it was Freud's Introductory Lectures. He was more into medicine and not into psychology. And I started reading it, and I couldn't put it down. So passion got me into the area of psychology. And then I talk about pivots. As I mentioned to you, I was working in one area, and then I pivoted from that into the business. And my career has been full of these pivots. I see these opportunities or interests, and I pivot into those interests. Positivity is just about, I have a positive attitude about this stuff. I don't regret any of the work that I loved everything I did. I loved working in the Children's Mental Health Center. I loved starting a business. I love working in TV. So positivity has been my attitude, or the way that I think about all these things that I've done. And what was my final P? I can't remember now.
Purpose.
Positivity. Purpose is what guides us all the way along. Yeah, that's probably the most important. Finding purpose that really motivates you, that gets you going and excited. And in our organization, we want to make sure that everybody sees our purpose. And that's why our engagement, I believe, is so high. We have 230 employees, probably more than that now. Last night, my HR person told me we have 230, and they're scattered. I have an office in Belfast, in Northern Ireland. We have American employees. We have employees throughout Canada. And I'm always at the town hall stressing our purpose. And I think people really cling to that. Our voluntary leave rate is like 4%. People are blown away when I go to CEO meet, like other companies, and they hear that. Like people we do let go people because they don't work out for us, but the people who want to leave us is like 4%, which is really low. I mean, most companies, it's maybe 15% or so. So I think it's the purpose, the fact that what we're working for is changing people's lives. What our organization does is use psychology in a big way. I used to do it one-on-one, seeing clients, and then teaching in a classroom. But you can only influence so many people that way. When we put out an instrument like the Connors Rating Scale, we're helping millions of kids each year. Like, it's phenomenal. And that's just one area. I mean, we're in a number of different areas. So we've had a worldwide impact. And I think that purpose really helps drive our employees.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, having several pivots in your career, and I think that's something that a lot of psych students struggle with after finishing their undergrad, especially figuring out what they want to do. So much so that I think it's a little bit of a cliche at this point, and it's still something very real, and definitely something that I can, resonate with. So what advice would you give to students who are unsure about where their career is headed, and maybe they have found their career and then they're trying to figure out how to move on to something else? What advice would you give?
Well, I think the first thing is to find out what your passion is. And you may not always get the first job that meets your passion. But if you know what it is, I think it's really important to understand yourself and to know yourself. Are you someone who's really turned on by the environment? Are you turned on by social justice? Like, what are the things that are important to you? And then the question is, how does psychology fit into that? One of the beautiful things about psychology is that it has such a wide range. It covers so much territory. We can apply it to almost anything. And I think it's a matter of finding that fit, where you are and what your values are and what you stand for, and then looking at the broad field of psychology and finding out which part, is it something in neuropsychology that excites you? Is it something about organizational psychology? Is it something about developmental psychology? There's so many areas to pick and choose from. And I think if you can kind of put those two things together and then search for the job that's right for you, and it may not be traditional. I mean, the world's changed. When I came out, everybody had to go either work in a clinic or a hospital. I mean, that was basically your choice, right? Even private practice was rare at that time. Not many psychologists were in private practice. That was just beginning. So you have to sort of look outside the box and say, where can I apply the knowledge that I have, and how would I do that? So I think that's going to be important. Go for the job that you have to get started, because you got to make a living, you got to get started. But while you're there, continue to learn and develop and find yourself and pivot yourself to the area that fits you.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the biggest mistake is that young psychology students make when starting their careers?
That's a good question. Sometimes it's expectations, that are they there to learn? Are they there for a paycheck? Are they there to really understand what it is about their first job or how they see it? Is there a time frame on it? Is it, this is really what I want to do for 2 years or for 4 years, or this is where I see myself going? I think it would be good if they developed a 2-year and a 5-year plan where I'd like to be. This is where I am now. This is what I want to get out of my current position. And not to get discouraged. The job's often, maybe it doesn't turn out to be the way you thought it would. Maybe you don't like it as much. I would say give yourself a significant period of time to stick with it, to get through it, and to use it as a learning experience so you'll know better what you want the next time. A lot of students, I think, want to give up too soon or quit too early, as opposed to using it as an experience to go to the next level.
All right, so Stephen, you're a pioneer in something called emotional intelligence. You wrote a book called The EQ Edge that's had a huge impact on understanding emotional intelligence. I'm just going to show you a video that we took at McMaster University. We were asking students what they know about emotional intelligence. See if this works.
What is emotional intelligence?
How available you are to other people and how much you can understand what people are going through.
The ability to interpret other people's emotions and your own.
Okay.
The ability to understand your emotions and other people's emotions and really to empathize with others.
Now, would you rather have a high IQ or a high EQ?
High EQ, because that really is vital to interacting in a society, and I feel like with a higher EQ you can really maneuver social situations.
IQ.
Why?
I think that you can learn EQ and you can't really learn IQ.
So Stephen, just wondering if you have any reactions to that video, if you can maybe define for our audience what EQ is, how it's distinct from IQ.
Okay, well, that's great. Those are great answers. Let me first of all say, when we started working in the area of emotional intelligence, nobody knew what it was. It was totally unknown. The first paper was published in 1989 by Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer. So it was only invented back in 1989. So some of those answers weren't bad. So basically, there are now a number of different theories, slightly different theories since it began, but they all have 3 things in common, basically. One is your ability to understand or read emotions, your own emotions and other people's emotions, your ability to manage emotions, both yours or other people's, as best we can, And thirdly, the ability to use emotions to either get things done, to make decisions, to deal with other people. So some of the work we do with high performance athletes or entertainers is to be able to put themselves in the right emotional state to do what they have to do, even when they don't feel like doing it. So that's kind of using emotions. Now, again, there's variations on the different theories of emotional intelligence, but they all cover those topics more or less. Those are pretty central to all the different theories of emotional intelligence.
And is IQ more fixed and EQ more malleable?
Yeah,
Is
I would say that IQ is more fixed. It's not as changeable, whereas EQ can change, but there are limits to that change. Some people who, let's say, have extraordinarily high emotional intelligence, I would classify people like Oprah Winfrey, or people talk about Bill Clinton and some of those people. You may never get to that level of emotional intelligence, but you can certainly do better than you're currently doing by practicing and coaching and learning the right skills or improving those skills.
So what would you rather have, a higher IQ or a higher EQ?
I'd rather have both. So even if they're both high, that would be the ideal situation. I hate to sort of pit one against the other, but they both open different doors. High IQ obviously opens doors in academia and in areas like that. It really is most related to things like school success and learning academic things. But EQ is broader in terms of it opens doors at work with other people. It's more of a social kind of door opener and helps you rise through different levels of society using that. So once you've peaked in your IQ, it's ready to really open the doors on your EQ and use that to get ahead in life. They would often say early on, IQ gets you in the door, but EQ gets you upstairs, gets you to the top.
So be honest here. Do you think that Gen Z demonstrates more or less emotional intelligence compared to older generations?
Well, actually, we got some real data on some of that. So in some ways they're a little bit higher, in some ways they're lower. So they tend not to deal with stress as well. They tend to not, the younger ones aren't as good at problem solving, for example. On the other hand, they're very high in self-actualization, meaning they want to learn more about themselves. They want to better themselves. They want to improve. When they go to a job, it's not, what can I do for you? It's, what are you going to do for me? Whereas in my generation, we were seeing what we could do to please the organization. How can I contribute to the organization? But we're finding in some of our surveys that the Gen Z and younger are, I don't know what the best word is, but a bit more fragile. They don't deal with anxiety as well. It's almost as though they were micromanaged by their parents or others for too long. They're not risk takers. They're not as good with stress. So those are the areas that kind of bring down their EQ. They're also not as good in social skills, and part of that is social media. They spend so much time on social media and less time interacting live in person with other people. I think it affects their social skills, and even worse with COVID, that with the lockdowns makes it even worse. I think Jonathan Haidt has written a lot and done a lot of research on the effects of social media, cell phones on kids, and especially young females, and how it's really hindered their development.
All right. Well, speaking of social media, you literally wrote the book on emotional intelligence, but today we're going to test you on something I like to call emoji intelligence.
Wow.
So I'm going to... I crack myself up. Okay. So I'm going to show you some emojis, and then I just want you to tell me how you would interpret them. All right. If someone sent you a text ending with this emoji, what would you think that they're trying to convey?
Well, I would think that they're pretty upset about something. That they're either upset and angry at me or just basically upset.
So actually, we use this emoji as a laughing emoji or like a strong emotion. So if you told me that you fell down the stairs this morning and you were fine, but you fell, and like embarrass yourself, maybe I would use this emoji.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. This is the next emoji.
Emoji of death. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
So this emoji I would use when I'm like the term "I'm dead," like I'm dying laughing, or like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Dying laughing. Okay.
Yeah. Like
Something is unbelievable or something like that. And then that's your reaction, or
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I got that wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if it's just like something so outrageous that you're like, oh my God, I'm dead. Like, you use this emoji. Like, okay, next one. All right, this one's kind of hard.
That is a hard one. Yeah, an upside down smiley face. I guess to me, I would admit my instant thought would be that you're sarcastic about being happy. That, yeah, I'm not really happy. You think I'm happy, but I'm not really happy.
Yeah, you got that one right. Good job.
Really? I got one right.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's how you use that one. It's like a sarcastic. It's like a sarcastic smile. Okay, next one. This one's a bit controversial.
Well, I kind of use that. I think is all great. I agree. That's terrific. Go for it. Am I wrong?
Yeah,
Am I sending the wrong message to people?
Some people would use it in that way. I think like in the workplace, at least for me, I'll use thumbs up. But if someone was telling me something about their day, like, oh, I went to the store today and I got this new shirt, and I send them this thumbs up, that would be rude.
It would be what?
It's like a really dry response, I feel like.
A dry response?
Yeah, like
Yeah. Or I think it's been used as sometimes
Yeah, like
passive
passive-aggressive.
aggressive. If someone's maybe revealing something vulnerable, and that's the thumbs up is a little bit of a passive aggressive reply.
Yeah.
You have to watch myself now.
It's context matters, though.
Yeah,
I
I
guess.
think context definitely matters for this one. Some people don't find it offensive. Some people would be very offended by this emoji. Okay, this is the last one.
I'm assuming that you're really happy and are we sarcastic again?
Yeah, this one's a bit sarcastic. This one, like, if I was like, I found out that I missed my exam and I was like texting my friends like, oh my gosh, I just realized my exam was yesterday, I would use this emoji. It's like, yeah.
Inappropriately happy.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
inappropriately happy.
it's like shock. Like, you're so shocked. You're like,
Right.
I don't know how to describe it. Okay, that's all I have for.
Well, Stephen, is there anything that you would recommend young people can do to boost their emotional intelligence?
There's probably a number of things they could do, but one of them I think is to take some risks in life. Not huge risks, don't get yourself in trouble, but when it comes to making decisions, once in a while try the uncomfortable choice and see how you make out or get through it. Or if someone suggests something and you're trying to decide between two things, and maybe they have good reason for suggesting it, it doesn't feel right, it may be something you want to try and take a risk and see where it goes. So one is that. And the other thing I commonly talk about is empathy, is just listening to other people and trying to find out where they're coming from. One of the problems we have in the world today is that this great divide, people aren't talking to each other. There's this political divide, which is really, really devastating, that people, even within families, have different political sides, refuse to talk. So asking questions and understanding before you make yourself known where you stand on something, I think that would be important.
Yeah, you talked about taking risks, and you've done pioneering work on a concept called hardiness. And I think people have maybe a little bit more familiar with terms like resilience and grit. Can you help our audience distinguish between these different terms and why they're important?
So resilience usually means something bad happens, puts you down, and then eventually you come back up to where you were, right? So that's how we see resilience. And grit means putting your shoulder to the wheel, just going against all odds, keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So hardiness, we call the 3 C's, which I'll get to, which is commitment, control, and challenge, is more about And compared to resilience, is more about coming out stronger than you were after the devastating event. So learning, growth. Some people call it traumatic growth after a bad experience. And unlike grit, it's about changing direction when it's time. If you want to be a concert pianist and you're working at it 8-10 hours a day, and you're not going to get there, you just don't have the talent, it's a waste of time for you to spend the rest of your life trying to get there when it's not going to happen. People high in grit, they keep going, right? They don't stop and shift. There's a couple of interesting research studies, one looking at gamblers in Vegas, and the ones with a higher in grit lose a lot more money because they keep believing they're going to win against the odds. And the other one is a study looking at mountain climbers. Mountain climbers with highest grit are more likely to die because they don't realize this is dangerous. I better go back down right now. They just keep going. So that's why we prefer hardiness. And there have been some really interesting studies. My co-author, Paul Bartone, is a retired colonel from the U.S. Army. He was actually chief psychologist in the U.S. Army. And he was at West Point and did 20-odd years of research on this topic. And they looked at emerging leaders coming out of West Point. And they compared things like hardiness and grit and resilience. And hardiness was your best predictor of who's going to be a great leader down the road. Again, we wrote a book on it. There's a lot of data on it. There's a lot of stories and interesting anecdotes. But in a nutshell, that's the difference.
This work seems to align a lot with principles of Stoicism. Are you familiar with that philosophy? And do you see the fit there, like embracing challenges and overcoming them and growing stronger from them?
Yeah, to some degree, there's some overlap with that. It's not entirely the same. Stoicism is part of it, but part of it, when we talk about challenge in hardiness, we talk about stepping back and trying to analyze the problem and look at it maybe as a friend of yours would look at it. What would they give you for advice? And thinking your way through it is part of learning from the experience. And the other part of control is knowing the difference from what part of the problem you can manage versus what is beyond your control. And not wasting a lot of time on things you can't control. Like you can't control the weather. If you're a tennis player in a championship round, you can control your serve, you can control your returns or where you stand, but you can't control that the other person's going to call you names or diss you, or the weather's bad, or the umpire's going to make a bad call. Those are beyond your control. Don't waste your time on those things. And finally, commitment has to do with what we talked about earlier in terms of purpose. So beyond just being stoic, it's also having a direction in life, like what's important to me, what is my purpose, and that helps guide you through and improves your hardiness.
Do you have any practical strategies you can share for turning stress into a motivator and rather than letting it become a setback?
Yeah, but what is this challenge area that I'm talking about is where I step back. I'm going through a tough situation. I just lost my job or whatever. And there's all kinds of bad stuff, and I get through the bad part of it, how it feels bad, and have negative prospects. But then I step back and say, well, what can I learn from this? And that's how hardiness began, by the way, when they were studying some executives who, as a result of a merger, these people all lost their jobs. And about 80 to 85% of them just did what you'd expect. They got angry and tried to fight back and get their job back, but that was to no avail. About 10% of them stepped back and said, okay, this isn't going to happen. I'm not going to get that job. What would I like to do? What have I always wanted to do? Like one person said, well, I've always wanted to open a bakery and be a baker. Maybe I'll go try that. Or someone else said, I've always thought about working for this other company. So how can you turn it around or look at the situation and think of other options from that situation rather than focusing on getting angry or depressed or things that aren't going to move you forward, and looking at it as an opportunity. So when something bad happens, I'd like to ask myself, what opportunity might there be from this? What can I gain? We lose a major sale. It's upsetting. It's bad. We put so much time into it. What can I learn? What can we do better the next time? Or what were some of the reasons that we may not have won this that we can improve upon? So looking at the brighter side of a negative situation.
What about for students in particular dealing with stress from balancing academics and their personal life and maybe a part-time job and trying to plan their future career? What advice would you give to them?
So this sort of time management is a real challenging area. And I like to think of it in terms of values management as opposed to time management. So I picture what's important to me. And if we think in the student context, obviously my grades are important or getting through school. So that's going to be a high value for me. But I also need to make money to support myself. So that's going to be pretty high on that totem pole. So I'm going to rank order my values, and I'm going to use my time as efficiently as I can to maximize each of those values. How can I maximize the time I put into schoolwork that's going to get me the grades that I need to go further, but yet still have the time I need to do work, to bring in money, to help support myself. But I need a social life, and that's important to me too. So how do I rank order a social life? So it's a matter of first rank ordering the importance. I rank them. School is most important. I'm here to get my education. I need money to survive, so that's going to be number 2. But I want to have a good time, so that's number 3, right? And I work my way through those and use that whenever I make decisions, whenever I set priorities. It just helps me get through the day so I don't spend all my time worrying about how I'm messing up my time, failing, or whatever.
Now, on the Enriched Mindset podcast, we're really interested in the psychology of money. And on Beast Games, for example, contestants are competing for a massive $5 million prize, some winning an island, a Lamborghini. We've had contestants on the show even passing up $1 million for the sake of strangers. And money seems to tap into something really primal, plays such a huge part of our lives. From your perspective, how does money influence human behavior and relationships?
Well, one of the things I love about reality TV is that it lets you see real-time psychology. I mean, I don't know what they're teaching you guys now in grad school, but in my day, social psychology was a big thing. The Darlene Latine experiments, Zimbardo experiments, like all those. You can't do them anymore, I guess, because of the ethics committees won't let you. But we can do them in reality TV, which is what I love about reality TV. We can set up situations that the academics can't. My colleagues in universities can't do anything near what we do, right? So we get to see these things actually play out. And in terms of my testing stuff, we actually can have looked at trying to predict winners by looking at test scores, because we test them before they go in, follow them up. In 8 or 10 weeks, you know who's lucky and who's not, or who wins and who doesn't. And we can tie that directly. So in terms of money, as you mentioned, there's some really surprising things. Do people go on reality TV for money? Often not. Often these are fans. They want to win. They want to be the master chef. They want to win Big Brother. And in this case, it was really interesting when we saw 4 people actually turn down $1 million. Like in Canadian TV, if we give away $100,000, that's huge. That's like a big prize. People turning away $1 million, they've been able to get what's with that. So for me, it's great, and I had the opportunity to interview some of those people. So that's what makes it really fascinating. Why would you ever do that? And for some people, it's more about reputation. They know they're going to be seen by millions. And I don't know if you saw this, but in the first 25 days, that show got 50 million viewers. Just unbelievable. And your friends and your family and people who are important to you. And do you want them to see you as someone who gave up your friends or all these people, their dreams, so you could get $1 million? It's amazing how powerful, and I don't think I would have predicted this. I don't know who would have predicted this, that that pull can be from saving 60 strangers. Keeping them in the game is more important than yourself taking $1 million. But they were thinking, not just here and now, what's going to happen now. When I go back to my real life and people see that I did that, how are they going to see me? They're going to have a lot of respect for me. I'm the guy who turned down $1 million in TV in front of millions of people for my self-respect and to save all these people who voted me as their leader. I mean, that's, that turns a lot of psychology on its head. I mean, nobody, I don't think, would predict that. So money plays a funny role in this stuff. Yet people are in there. A lot of people have said, oh, I'm in there for the money. I quit my job at Walmart. I'm doing this. I gave up everything. I need that $5 million. Money plays a funny role. What people do in search of money, but sometimes self-respect or other factors come in and modify that and change it. So it's a complicated relationship. And I think reality TV maybe will help give us some clues on how that works.
Wow. So with that in mind, what do you think the relationship is between specifically money and happiness from a psychological perspective?
Well, I think we've looked at enough lottery winners to know that money doesn't lead to happiness. Money is, I see it as a cushion. So it prevents unhappiness, the fact that you're not starving or you're not living in a crappy place or missing out on things that you want to do. But it's not the road to happiness. There's other roads to happiness. And I stick to things like having a purposeful life, having accomplishments. I think those are much more direct route to happiness. Personally, there were our early days I didn't have a lot of money, and now I guess I'm lucky I have a lot of money. It doesn't mean I'm happier that I have a lot of money. I've been happy both times because I have the luxury of pursuing what I want to do. To me, that's, I mean, I don't want to give away the money, but it's much more important to my life, the fact that I have freedom, that I could go off and do reality TV shows or do research on anything I want to do. That's much more important. The money gives me the lifestyle that I've learned to enjoy, but purpose and commitment and accomplishments lead more to my actual happiness in life. In fact, I know people that are very wealthy. I deal with a lot of wealthy people, and I've seen a lot of wealthy people who are unhappy for all sorts of reasons. But the money and the happiness is not a direct link. There's a lot of unhappy millionaires, and there's even unhappy billionaires. But there are also some happy ones as well.
Would you say perhaps reaching financial independence gives you at least the option to live a more purposeful life, but not everyone chooses that?
Right. I would say that if you see it that way, I think you're much better off. If you see money as a vehicle to get you there, but not as the end point, the money itself isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
But if you use the money wisely to help you get the things you want, then it'll be easier to pursue the things that lead to happiness. But, when we did emotional intelligence, one of the things I was interested in was contrasting people struggling in life from very successful people. So I did surveys of homeless people. We worked with people suffering from severe cancer. We looked at people going through bad marital relationships. So we looked at a lot of suffering people. At the same time, we looked at successful people, CEOs who were successful, top salespeople, top lawyers, top physicians. And we contrasted emotional intelligence in those groups. And there are some people who have very little materially who are still happy in life, right? There's some homeless people who do really well, believe it or not. They know how to scrounge well. They know how to, get stuff that they need. They seem to be happy. Not many of them, but there's a few of them who seem to be happy with what they have and how they get along in life. And they've refused offers of bettering their life. Now, it's hard to really comprehend that from where we sit, but you can see that. They find happiness in something else that's not materialistic.
Now, many of our listeners are really interested on the financial side of psychological careers. Can you share the range of income that psychologists can expect throughout their career? Particularly if you're become an entrepreneur. Like, I think in grad school, money's taboo and they frown upon this aspect of career development. But can you share what is possible for people who have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because there aren't many examples. I mean, I don't even know what the going rate is for psychologists graduating today. I'm sure there's published rates either through government or industry. But as an entrepreneur generally, there's really no limit to what you can do and how much you can make. I wouldn't put a limit on it. We keep generating more with the things that we do. If you pick the right path, you're doing the right things, your income will increase accordingly. So I don't think there's any particular limit on what you can make. Entrepreneurs, some of them just get by. Some of them will make $1 million a year. and be happy with that. But other ones I know are making $100 million a year and keep going.
Right.
They're going to go even bigger.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, can you tell us one key piece of advice you might leave us for aspiring psychologists, entrepreneurs, or just for people looking to live a more purposeful and meaningful life? Like one key piece of advice reflecting on your whole career path?
Well, I think one is to find your passion and take risks within there to get to the place where you're happy with what you're doing. So it's a combination, actually, of really knowing your passion. Like I'm passionate about psychology and using psychological science to better the world. That's a passion. But I've taken a number of risks to pursue that passion. Not all of them have been successful risks, but more of them have been successful than haven't been. So that's how we've been able to grow an organization to 230 people. The fact that we've taken these risks and everything we do fits within the realm of psychology and using psychological science to better people's lives.
Dr. Stein, can you just take a minute to talk about your latest projects and where our listeners can learn more about you and some of your work?
So you'll find me at stevenstein.com on the internet. You'll find our company at mhs.com in terms of products. I'm involved in a number of different projects, but one of them right now I'm looking at is more around engagement in the workplace. What do we do to keep people engaged? What are some of the key factors of engagement and the relationship to leadership? And I've been looking at the evolution of leadership in the business world from 120 years ago, from the days of Henry Ford through to Bill Gates, forward to someone named Anita Broderick, who put social responsibility into leadership, and then up until people like Howard Kurtz, who started Starbucks, who cared about his people and made sure they all had health care and educational opportunities. I'm calling it unconditional love. I'm looking at how unconditional love can increase employee engagement, can increase productivity, and all the benefits that one can have using something as weird, I guess, as unconditional love in the workplace. So that's the project I'm working on right now.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. Well, thank you so much again, Stephen, and to our listeners, and we'll see you on our next episode of the Enriched Mindset Podcast.